Hi, welcome to your academic career podcast. I am Dr. Loren M. Hill, and today I have with me KL Moore from KL Image Group. And let me tell you about KL. I met her probably a decade ago now, and she was presenting at a conference and her topic, it was a women's empowerment conference. They had a number of areas that they were covering that day, leading with finance. And then KL came in and talked to us about image, and she was phenomenal. And something that we don't always think about is really like how you show up in the room, right? We might have other parts of our lives together. We might have other parts of our career together, but how you show up in the room is really important. And it goes beyond image. So KL has had a stellar career. She was in STEM previously. She made her mark in the industry, and then she ended up transitioning in a way to share all of this valuable information and insights through coaching. So welcome, KL. It is such a pleasure to finally get you on our podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Loren. I, of course, am delighted to be here. We've been talking about doing this and finally, so I am excited, and thank you for the delightful intro.
Yes, yes, it's my pleasure. We always have so much fun when we're together. And so tell us about your career journey, if you will. Like, when you started in STEM, and I know you've had some time working in higher ed, you've even worked with K through 12, but how did you get here?
Wow, let's see how much time we have. No. Oh my goodness. Yes. So my background, I'm an electrical engineer, and I started my career in the manufacturing industry. And like most African Americans, I was taught to go to school, get a good job, work really hard, and surely you will get promoted. And now I think, of course, we both know that that is not accurate. Certainly working smart, that's a good thing, but you get the picture. But anyway, I started out in electrical engineering, started my career in ag biotech at a plant where I wore steel-toe shoes, hard hat, and safety glasses. So I did not look like this going to work. And I worked with guys who were twice my age, who didn't look like me, sound like me, or think like me. And I learned very quickly that it wasn't so much about what I knew, it was all the other soft skills in terms of how I was able to get certain things done based on influence and communication skills and the need to network to be able to go to the next level. So that's how I started out in engineering. And the reason I do what I do now is because of my experience in engineering. I was this tiny, petite thing, less than, back then, probably about 80 pounds. And in that industry, you had to, again, you needed to know how to maneuver if you wanted to get the job done. And so I had to learn a lot trial by fire. And in terms of how I carried myself, how we got things done. And I ended up just pursuing my passion. I just knew that there was more to life than what I was doing at that time, and decided to come out of corporate and was working on my MBA, left the manufacturing industry. And my first endeavor, I opened a boutique. Now, I know that is a very logical progression to go from engineering to a boutique owner. But I'd always been intrigued with fashion, and that was just something that I loved doing. And initially, I thought it was just kind of vain in terms of, there's no meat in terms of style and fashion. You shop because you want to shop. But I learned that no, there was so much more to that. And my first venture as a business owner, I opened a boutique. And that's where the golden nugget became clear to me, because my clientele, well, they were women, real estate agents and lawyers and judges, people who needed to look a certain way, to carry themselves a certain way in order to increase their sales or to connect with their stakeholders or what have you. And that's where I really got to see the power of how we show up, So that was the first part in terms of image consulting and clothes. And then the final phase, Loren, I transitioned from an image consultant, from a boutique owner and an image consultant, I transitioned to training and doing personal development coaching, which is what I do now. And the reason for that transition is because I started to see the need for a more comprehensive approach. When I would do my training programs, even about with image, people would say to me, can you say that the way you just said it before? You know, that when you were talking about that situation with the guys, the way you handled that, can you tell us how you did that? And I'm going, okay. And so I figured out that there was so much more to all of, how we show up, not just the image part in terms of what you wear, but how you speak, how you move, the body language, the words, all of that. And so eventually executive presence became really the foundation of what I do in terms of getting particularly women who work in male-dominated environments to show up the right way in the workplace.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so all of those areas that you've been in, hard hat and steel toe boots, all the way to stilettos, right? I just think that's so fun and amazing. And the fact that you are able to share, and it will before that to identify that there were these other areas that were not addressed right by the market, and then able to share that with women to help them advance. And that's really something that is still needed to this day, right? We all need that kind of input to help us make the sales, bring in the client, close the deal, if you will. And I know those of you who are listening, who are, faculty or administrators, are saying, okay, now how does this relate to higher ed? Well, here's the thing. KL's going to talk to us today about some things that we need to think about in terms of showing up in the room, right? There's some mistakes that we make when we are maybe coming in, maybe speaking, how we position ourselves. And so believe me, people are listening to you, or maybe they're not listening to what you're saying. And it's important to know why that might be happening. So KL, tell us about some of the things that you've encountered that are important for us to pay attention to. I know we've got some top mistakes, right? What would you say those are?
So I know from experience and also from working with my clients, there are three main areas that particularly women and BIPOC professionals, Black, Indigenous, people of color, that we tend to overlook when it comes to how we show up in the workplace. The first mistake is when we show up with an ineffective wardrobe. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is weak language, using weak language. And number three is succumbing to imposter syndrome. Now, I know you probably heard some of these words before and these concepts before, but I'm going to speak on executive presence relative to women and people of color, because the concepts from what I have experienced and with my clients is a bit different. So, for example, we talk about an ineffective wardrobe. First of all, we already know when it comes to clothing and attire, image, appearance, we know that women are evaluated on a different scale than men are. We know that for a fact. I don't even have to get into the stats around that. So now you take that concept in terms of us as women, and you think about, let's just think about clothes in general relative to men versus women. For men, it's pretty basic. You have shorts or pants, period. You have a short sleeve shirt and a long sleeve shirt, period. For women, we have short sleeve, 3/4 length, half length, long sleeve. When it comes to pants, I mean, we could go into all types of lengths and necklines, V-neck, crew neck, boat neck. Men don't have all that to choose from. So for us, when it comes to executive presence, this idea of how we show up, this is about how we draw people in, how we connect with people, how do we capture their attention. And this is one of the first things they see is our wardrobe. And I know that it's been said that before you ever say a word, you've already had a conversation with someone. So wardrobe is key. Now, if we've got all those areas where we can make mistakes, therein lies the problem for women. Within this idea of ineffective wardrobe, what I have found, my clients, it's either they dress too casual or too sexy. Too casual or too sexy. Because especially, oh my goodness, especially in this season with all of the era around COVID and being online and being able to, dress up the top and put on whatever on the bottom. But this is a clear mistake for us. It's a clear mistake because we're already behind the game. Now, I know a lot of women will say, but that shouldn't matter. It's about my skill sets. It's about my knowledge. Of course, we'd like to get there. We'd like to be there in terms of society, but we're not there yet. And we are being evaluated on that. And most of the times we underestimate how pulled together we need to look. And I always recommend that we want to use what I call the one-notch rule, period, the one-notch rule. That means that you should always be dressed slightly better than those around you. Women get that confused because sometimes they'll say, no, but with my teammates, my peers, I should be the same. No, always slightly better because there's a correlation in terms of how people perceive you relative to what you have on. So if you're dressed very casual, they think that that is your approach to doing business or your approach to academia. That becomes the mindset, and that's not the case. So we want to make sure that we're not dressing too casual. I'll give you an example on that in just a minute. And then the other one is dressing too sexy, because most of us, we've never been taught how to dress. We look at magazines, or we look at our friends, or we take cues from celebrities. And those are not the ideal places for if you're looking to move up, particularly as we're talking about in academia. So be careful where you're getting your messages from, because this idea of when I talk about dressing too sexy, sometimes women will say, but KL, I mean, I want to be feminine. Yes, you can still be feminine. I like to say that fitted is feminine, but tight is sexy. Mm-hmm. So, and there's another set of research that says men will date a sexy woman, but they don't want to report to one.
That's really all good stuff. And I can think of examples. I've been at multiple universities or places of higher ed, and I've seen those. And I know that there's another maybe category or style that I see where women dress too formally, like, or maybe a little too, like, too buttoned up, too black suit, gray suit, power suit. I see that in higher ed. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so the challenge in higher ed is what you're describing is being out of touch and being outdated. Meaning oftentimes we are still thinking back in the 80s in terms of what a power suit looks like and what those colors are. And I want to be clear that when I talk about wardrobe, that depends on your industry. So I'm going to bring it home to academia. When we talk about your industry, you're working generally with young people, young adults. And so you want that ability to connect with them. So if you're very suited, especially if you're suited in contrasting colors, we call those high contrasting colors like black and white, two totally different extremes, that can be very standoffish. And so there is a way to wear a suit, but for it not to be as formal. So I remember one particular client that I had was struggling with a similar thing, and she was very tall, had a very firm demeanor and way of speaking, just a very formal, as I call it, inherent impression. And I said to her, this idea of dressing, it's your own unique formula. And when I say your own unique formula, that's why you can't look at the magazines and all that good stuff. It's based off of your inherent impression. It's based off of your long-term and short-term goals, meaning where do you want to go? Where do you go? Do you want to remain in the classroom, or are you looking to move up into administration? So long-term, short-term goals. We want to look at who's your audience. Are you teaching K through 12? Are you teaching kindergartners? Are you teaching adults? All of those things matter. So your goals, your audience, your message. What do you want your message to be to those around you? So it becomes your formula. And this is what I do when I'm working with my clients. And for her, as I was sharing with you, this particular client that I'm thinking about, for her, I had to soften her to make her more approachable. Because think about it, when we're communicating, the goal is to be open and approachable. We want people to be able to connect with us, especially your students, especially parents, especially stakeholders, or people that are at board meetings or whatever it is, networking meetings that you're attending. And so we want to be open. So that suit may not still be black and white, and it might not be double-breasted with gold buttons. It may be more of a drapey fabric. You might pop some color in there. As you can see today, I'm layered, but I'm layered with color, so that you create this approachability, because you want to be able to connect with people. So remember, your industry matters. And with students, they need to know that they can relate to you. So yeah, just get out of your mind the old black and white, starch suit with with some basic pumps. No, that's not what we're doing anymore.
Right. So it's style and it's fashion, and it is what we're communicating non-verbally, right? So I wondered if we could now go into your, I think this is great because we're talking about language. So what about this using weak language? Tell us about it.
And you know what, Dr. Hill, you were saying one of the things you've seen in academia is the very formal look, but I've also seen the other extreme of where professors are coming in and they are far too casual.
Right.
And just, so anyway, but yes, so
I've seen that too.
Yes. So the weak language. Now, this is one when we talk about executive presence. Remember, executive presence, the three pillars that we talk about in executive presence are gravitas, which is how you act, communication, how you speak, and then of course, appearance, that's how you look. And so this communication piece is key, because when you think about it, just doing business, and even in academia, you think about a lot of our leaders and the way that the whole community was set up years ago was based around male principles. And so oftentimes the type of communication style that tends to work best is an assertive communication style, meaning being more direct, but not aggressive, being firm, being decisive. All those things matter. And so when I've said that that becomes a challenge for women in BIPOC, because we use weak language that takes away from our credibility. We're supposed to be subject matter experts. Well, we are subject matter experts. But if we use disclaimers such as, well, I'm not sure about that. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but let's take a look at that. No, you don't need to say that disclaimer. You don't need to say that you're not an expert. You don't need to say you're not sure that it's not going to work. Just say it. Just say it. And another example of this idea of using weak language is over apologizing. That's one that just, oh my goodness. And I get it why we do it, because what we're trying to do when we over apologize, it's, sorry, do you have a minute? Or sorry to bother you. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. No, just say it. And what we're trying to do when we use that word sorry over and over again, we're trying to use or convey empathy. And empathy is a part of executive presence. It is a great leadership skill to have. But over apologizing is not empathy. When you think about it, when we say sorry, what does the word sorry convey? What does it convey? When you think of sorry, what does it mean when we say that we're sorry, Dr. Hill?
Well, for me, it means that we're expressing some kind of empathy, like you mentioned, or we've noticed something that went wrong and we're trying to rectify it, or we're trying to extend to someone else. And I think that when I hear people say it, it's usually because something bad happened or will be happening.
Yeah, and in addition to that, when we say I'm sorry, it usually conveys that we've done something wrong, meaning we're apologizing for no reason. So we're taking on fault or blame for something we didn't even do.
Mhm.
So what happens subconsciously is that we become the fault person, the blame person. So if you're trying to figure out why you're losing power with people around you, this is what you're doing in meetings. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. You're losing power every time you say that. Matter of fact, I just had a client who I was working with, and she was sharing with me how she's even taken that message home to share with her daughter,
Yes.
because we pass this on and on and on. And oftentimes it's not always females, it's a female communication style. So you
Right.
may meet a male that does the same thing if he has a female communication style. So we want to be careful that we are showing up in a way in which we can influence, we can direct. And I always say, great leaders get other people to follow them, not because they have to, but because they want to. And
Yes.
you don't want to follow somebody that feels weak.
Yes, yes. And so this is also a good lead in, I think, to the next area of imposter syndrome, because some of that language, the weak language, or even more specifically, apologizing for something, and oh, I'm sorry, that's probably in most of our, vocabulary, right? How many times, oh, I'm sorry, but can I just, right? And so sometimes it is you may feel like you don't belong there. And that could be because the environment doesn't really support or lend to you being there. As you mentioned earlier with higher ed, that was always a place for men, right? And so then now you got women in there, and then you got BIPOC people in there. And so nothing around looks like you, or
Nothing.
things like you. And you look at those people who've been there before you, the photos on the wall and the portraits, and you're like, where do I fit in here? And so and I know, and some of our listeners know, the whole idea of imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon came out of research with women executives back in the 70s, right? So I think it's really important for us to continue to examine this and talk about why you feel like this is something that undermines executive presence when you succumb to imposter syndrome.
Yeah, imposter syndrome, it just suffocates our greatness. It suffocates our greatness. And this, when you think about what it does, no matter how great we are, no matter what we've been hired to do, no matter what skills we've acquired, we are still stuck in that paralysis mode of why am I here? I can't believe I can't believe that I can do this. Or do they really believe in me? Better yet, do I believe in myself? And so when you think about that, if you don't believe in you, who else will? So if you don't think you have executive presence, trust me, even if you have it, nobody else will think so, because that is not what you're going to project, because that's what you're struggling with internally. Now, I get it because of all the challenges that we've had. And oftentimes there are things that have happened to us along the way in terms of different experiences that make you start to doubt yourself. But this is one of those things that keeps you from really walking into believing that you can even acquire and project executive presence.
And, I think because I talk about executive presence and how, imposter syndrome, like how can those be in the same space, right? And they can be in the same space. And I think that one of the things that would be important to sort of helping you recover from imposter syndrome, because you may not be immune to it, but you don't have to succumb to it, is really thinking about connecting to others and networking. And I know that you talk a lot about networking, and I talk about a whole team me, so that when you start to have these things creep into your head, and we all have messages that we have playing in our head. I'm a psychologist, so the whole cognitive tape thing, right? So when these happen, you can talk to someone and reach out and sort of check in with them. Like maybe you're the first and only in this space, or maybe you're getting ready to go, you're a new department chair, an administrator, or even faculty member, and you have these questions about, do I really belong here? And if you have a network or a team or even a coach or a mentor that you could just sort of talk through some of what you're going through, that can help, I think, buffer. What would you say about that, KL?
You hit the nail on the head, Dr. Hill. When I think about my clients, this is one of the benefits of coaching. There's no doubt about it, because most of them are living in a silo. Most of them are living in a silo. And, I'm just thinking about one particular client right now I was working with her to get her prepared to go to a major conference, and just really getting her to embrace, you can do this, and you are just as important, just as equal as anybody else in the room. I mean, it was a lot of head work in terms of what I needed to do in order to prepare her, because you're sometimes struggling with even just looking at other people. It's not always people that don't look like you. Sometimes it's people that do look like you, and you're still feeling you don't feel like you belong, or you don't feel like you have what it needs to succeed. And I was giving her some specific tips to help her be more confident, because I know that if you have the right tools and strategies, that will help you get rid of some of the doubt, some of that self-doubt. So showing her or teaching her how to walk into that room in a confident way, what to do the moment she sits down, what are some of the questions she needs to be asking immediately, and how does she make her presence known? I mean, literally, I was going through lists, and she just said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know these things existed." And I'm also, as I think about my own clients, I am working with them to help them understand the need to reach back and teach somebody else all these things that we're learning. So, because there's somebody behind you who does not have a go-to person.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's all
Network
about networking.
and connection, right? And so, because I work with people who are like, oh, networking, that's not for me. And I'm like, there's a lot. You're already networking, right? We're just putting a title on it and making sort of building it out. So let's make sure that you're doing it in a way that helps with your advancement in career and life, and really just helps you and helps others. So this has been so informative and such a great time speaking with you today and learning about some of these tips and how we can make sure that we don't fall into these pitfalls. And I know that you have a special that you're going to extend to the listeners, but what we'll say is that it's a special rate if should you choose to work with KL, and it's a limited time offer. You will have to click on the link to find out more about it, but I encourage you to do so. So thank you, KL, for coming in and speaking with us today. This has just been great. And gotta say, I am just loving the way you're pulling together those colors today. They're just
Oh, thank you.
great. You're always so well put together and polished. And I continue to aspire to be like
Oh,
KL Moore.
oh, thank you. And it's been a delight to be able to share with your listeners. This is a topic that's dear to me, and it's very important that they go to the next level to learn what this means for them in the space that they're in and the goals that they have in this current moment.
Thank you so much. And once again, I'm Dr. Loren M. Hill. I'm your academic career coach, and we thank you for tuning in today.
Thank you again, and bye-bye.